Okay, Georgia, the floor is yours. Thank you for coordinating this and inviting Mr. Nusias to join us. We are looking forward to hear him.
Thank you very much. Dear augMENTOR partners, dear our invited guests, to begin with, I would like to thank you all for your attendance today. From my side, I acknowledge that your participation is of vital importance for the success of the event. My warmest welcome to all members of our sister projects. A special thanks for your participation. You are more than welcome to actively participate, exploring common needs and satisfying ethics requirements in terms of your projects. I'm Georgia Livieri, the Ethics Manager of the augMENTOR project and a member of the External Ethics Advisory Board. I'm more than delighted to have taken the initiative of organizing today's ethics seminar, which is dedicated to the needs of augMENTOR's consortium partners. But before we start, let me provide you with some more details on how we have worked so far. Given the fact that our speaker's ambition is not only to familiarize us with the new regulation, but also to examine ways of supporting the pilot partners during the implementation of AI strategies in education, we have welcomed questions from our consortium partners regarding responsible research and innovation, focusing on the measures and processes to promote and ensure scientific research and technological development, taking into account the effects and potential impacts on the environment and society. These questions have been used as a path to communicate the needs and queries of our consortium partners, navigating our speakers' preparation. Moving on, today's event aims to contribute to deepening your understanding of the new EU AI Act. It's a great honor to introduce our invited speaker. To learn more about him, let me share with you some information briefly. Mr. Alexandros Nusias is a research associate at the Institute of Informatics and Telecommunications of the National Center of Scientific Research, Democritus, where he focuses on digital and AI law, governance, and ethics. He holds a master's degree in intellectual property and provides consultancy services to research organizations, technology companies, and the creative industries, bridging the gap between research and market implementation. In academia, he is the lead instructor for applied ethics at the University of Peloponnese and at the University of Piraeus. Additionally, he lectures at several other institutions and mentors corporates and startups. Alexandros contributes as a technical consultant in the drafting of the national AI strategy for the Ministry of Digital Governance and is an active member of the group of experts for AI established by the National Commission for Bioethics and Technoethics. He is also appointed as a technical representative at the AI Standards Working Group within the EU AI Board proceedings. Furthermore, Alexandros is an Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers certified AI ethics lead assessor. Welcome, Alexandros. It's a pleasure to have you with us today as a keynote speaker for our first ethics seminar. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Georgia. Thank you all. Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure and an honor to try to communicate the objective and subjective aspects of the EU AI Act and the emerging landscape around AI and the vertical sectors like education. So I'll go straight to my topic, which is about how we can somehow integrate AI applications in our very nice European project called augMENTOR.
Okay.
So,
yes, Mr. Nusias will present his lecture titled Augmentary AI Innovation in Education through the lenses of the AI Act and Ethics. So, Alexa, we are looking forward to hearing your lecture. But before we start, let me share with you that free space for comments, insights, and/or questions can be found on chat. Thank you all for your understanding. So, Alexandros, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Georgia. So, well, let's start with the typical polarity between regulation and innovation. And I think this is quite important because when we're talking about a dynamic space like AI and a dynamic space like education, we cannot think of those two without blending the aspects of both regulation and innovation. So there is this false choice between regulation and innovation. Regulation, as we know, it can, subject to the Porter hypothesis, it can incentivize firms to transform their products and production processes in ways that generate not only environmental, health, safety, or other social benefits, but also to economic gains. This means more or less that regulation is not in principle stifling innovation as the argument goes. Rather, it allows entities, organizations, developers to upgrade or re-engineer their tech and proceed also to radical innovation, meeting the legal requirements and meeting also the first mover advantage. Because as the establishments, the enterprises, the organizations integrate AI systems nicely and in a compliant way, then they also meet the societal, human-centric, environmental requirements in order to make their products and services actionable and acceptable and susceptible for the human society. Of course, when it comes to education, this has a greater level of importance because education is a very dynamic space. We all see that the pervasiveness of technology in education is seamless, and we try to figure out ways of how we will manage to blend regulation and innovation in this dynamic space of education. A few words about the overall legal taxonomy, because when we talk about AI and regulation, people that are outside the legal spectrum tend to believe that AI Act is all what it is about. However, there are traditional and less traditional aspects that we need to take into account when we're talking about integration of AI systems in education. So to name a few, of course, is the directive on copyright rights in the digital single market, the copyrights regulation, if I may say. And this is important if you're not familiar with the concept. It is very important, especially regarding the copyrights versus training data dichotomy, and whether the AI output will be considered as a creative act, and all these very fundamental questions regarding synthetic content and how the synthetic content has been produced. Issues about security, the personal data regulations, GDPR rights and liabilities. Of course, when we talk about the personal data, we talk about the GDPR, we talk about the upcoming e-privacy regulation. This, at this point, is on hold. However, we expect that it will come into, it will land to the application, to the field, in the next coming months or years, maybe. When we talk about data, we keep focusing on personal data. However, when we talk about AI applications, many AI systems are trained with no personal data, which are also under some specific regulations in order to be managed in a compliant and legally compliant way. And when we talk about these two types of data, personal data or non-personal data, we also have the hat of open data. And why I'm saying this? Because we might be able to find personal data under open licenses, subject to prior cleansing or clearing of the data or other compliance acts of compliance. And the regulation of the free flow of non-personal data. So we have a quite sophisticated spectrum of regulations that apply solely to data. And this is about governance. And when we talk about governance and when we talk about platforms like the augMENTOR platform, then Digital Services Act, or in the augMENTOR case, the Digital Services Act apply, which more or less imposes extra, I wouldn't call it obligations, rather qualitative requirements for optimal user experience, if that makes any sense. And the Digital Governance Act, which is about how we actually process and manage data through the workflows in our augMENTOR platform. I will provide you with a nice graph, and I will showcase it, I will illustrate an ideal scenario on how we manage and process, let's say, personal data on that. On top of that, AI-related regulation comes at play, like AI Act, but also a couple of liability directives. I will illustrate in more detail of what's the relationship, the ontology between these regulations. And then we have the Data Act, which is about obtaining data from IoT or edge services or edge devices in order to make sure that all real-time data are processed in a compliant, legal, and ethical way towards optimal services. So this, as you can understand, is a quite complex legal framework that platforms like augMENTOR need to come along with and need to navigate in a nice and smooth way, because I understand that this, at first instance, might look a little bit overwhelming. However, I think that with the right and I want to say nice navigation and a nice polarity, let's say, assessment, we can find a nice way of navigating in this complex space. So when we talk about the augMENTOR platform per se, and these are taglines that I found from your platform, when we talk about augMENTOR, the legal and ethical focus, this is how I identified my legal and ethical focus while navigating in augMENTOR platform, was what you guys say about interactive and personalized and inclusive training. augMENTOR leverages emerging technologies, so we need to identify how this this verb stands to action. We're talking about a platform that integrates technologies in education and training, an open access AI boosted toolkit. To be honest, I have more questions than you on how augMENTOR platform actually materializes these aspects that I found on your platform. And the fact that augMENTOR deploys personalized learning profiles that consider students' personal characteristics, needs, and preferences. At first instance, these bullet points, and especially the last one, how can I say, trigger a lot of legal and ethical unrestness. I am not an opponent of technology. To the contrary, I really I endorse, I integrate technologies, and I encourage clients, organizations, research centers, startups, and companies to actually to integrate in actionable and meaningful ways exponential technologies like AI. However, from integrating and truly complying with the legal and ethical requirements, it's a quite long way, but which can be crossed in a nice way as long as we have mapped adequately the requirements that we need to, and the boxes that we need to check. In order to start this process, it's of great importance to actually identify, to unpack, if you may, the components of the definition of an AI system according to the AI Act. So when we talk about AI system, we talk about a machine-based system designed to operate with varying levels of autonomy and that may exhibit adaptiveness. So keep in mind that when we're talking about AI systems, the two core aspects, the two foundational elements of an AI system are autonomy and adaptiveness. So following this autonomy and adaptiveness, after deployment and after having provided in the system data and other kind of input from the environment, physical or virtual, doesn't matter, then this particular input is somehow positioned, introduced within the system, and subject to the calibration and the requirements and the architecture of the AI model. This data and input is being processed in order to infer from the input it receives ways on how to generate outputs such as predictions, content, recommendations, or decisions that can influence physical or virtual environment. So from this definition, I think it's quite clear that you have a direct interaction in a cyclical way between environment, physical or virtual, AI system, the model, and back. So we have input, AI process, output that brings influence, brings impact, generates impacts to the environment from which the initial input was driven. When we talk about AI system, we also need to take into account the various stakeholders. And augMENTOR, to my understanding, is a core stakeholder in the sense that it is a deployer. augMENTOR, and please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong here, but augMENTOR more or less integrates already existing AI systems that have been developed from third parties, other providers, typical providers, for example, Turnitin, or these numerous AI applications that are already on display. So when we talk about requirements, legal and ethical requirements, the liability or the obligation to check some boxes does not lie solely to the provider, but it also lies to the deployer, which means the user, the integrator, and of course, the other elements in the commercial value chain, which are the distributors and importers. But I think that we should see the augMENTOR platform under the lenses of the deployer. So some things to consider when we talk about obtaining through contract an AI system. As the augMENTOR consortium, we need to make sure that what we are obtaining for our platform needs is actually an AI system. So this is a model, let's say, introductory contract clause, in order to make sure that what we are talking about lies in the spectrum of the AI Act and the overall regulatory package. So when we talk about AI tools in education, we need to, let's say, something like intelligent tutoring systems. We need to take into account that we always have to maintain the same kind of feedback loops, positive feedback loops that ensure the compliance of the AI system. And when we talk about feedback loop, we talk about the initial training, the input data. Think of it from the definition that I shared 2 slides ago. Then we measure confidence, we actually deploy, or we allow the system, we integrate the system in a practical way in real time in our augMENTOR platform. We gain feedback, and then we continue this virtuous cycle. We train back, and so on and so forth. Let's zoom in a little bit in augMENTOR particular, and let's zoom in the personal.
Sorry, Alexander, I think Georgia has a comment.
Oh, yes.
Sorry to interrupt you.
Yes. I wanted to clarify that in our project, our consortium partners design all the AI tools. They
Okay.
integrate AI systems that are being developed in other third countries, for instance.
So you design and you deploy, do you develop from scratch within the consortium of augMENTOR?
If I may, Georgia, indeed, it's like Georgia said, we are working with the partners internally in the project, so the consortium partners, who are developing the augMENTOR solution end to end. The only external tool we are deploying, but it's not an AI provider, is Moodle, which is an open source learning management system. Yeah.
Okay, so this is more a legal load on your hands, because providers, developers, usually, and in principle, and I think that makes absolute sense, have quite a few obligations according to the AI Act, because these are the ones that kickstart the life cycle of the AI system. So first things first, you need to identify the list of the actual AI systems that you design, develop, and deploy. So I will put you mainly in the provider side, the developer side. So you have quite a few obligations on that, like contextualizing the way you are developing your system, creating the appropriate requirements and architecture following this contextualization, and identifying actually the actual problem that you are trying to solve within the context of augMENTOR. This is a very basic core approach on how we design, and develop, and deploy AI system. So let's focus on the personalized education aspect. You explicitly communicate in your nice video that you place the learner in the center of the learning process. So here we might come up with the basic trade-off, which is algorithmic performance versus real-world performance, which means the actual performance of your participants, your students that use the augMENTOR platform. So usually, when we are talking about design and development of AI tools, we keep focusing on algorithmic performance and actually somehow losing the impact in the real world. So this is something that we need to take care, and there are quite concrete steps on how we're supposed to do that. But let's step back a bit in order to identify the role of data in education. So we have this from descriptive to prescriptive data analytics that changes the game in a quite substantial way. Because if you think about it, at the beginning, in the earlier days, when we're talking about data in different domains, we were talking about descriptive analytics. So the main question was, what happened and why did it happen? So we were trying to identify why something actually occurred. And then we gradually transition to what will happen, which is the so-called predictive analytics, which is we start talking about how the AI systems look nowadays. But how, as the technology evolves from the information and insight focus, we slightly start transitioning on questions like, how do we make it happen? So from descriptive, we are going to prescriptive data analytics, which focus on decisions. And decisions matter because decisions have impact, and the impact influences the way we are supposed to classify the AI systems that we are supposed to develop within the context of the augMENTOR platform. So more or less, this is how the data value chain evolves. And This is a very, how can I say, important timing where we are supposed to classify the level of the risk of our AI system. On top of that, and this goes hand to hand with the structure of the definition per se, the feedback loop, in order to visualize it in a more explainable way, when we talk about this feedback loop, you as an augmentor platform, you need to keep repeating this particular feedback loop in order to make sure that as your system evolves, you are constantly updating your points of interest and your focus. Because as the system evolves and as your system are you keep feeding your systems with real-time data, let's say, the overall output may alter. So you need to have this constant feedback loop. On top of that, you need also to maintain this to identify and monitor this high order impact feedback loop, which goes also with the question about environmental impact, various societal issues that may arise, because the first order, let's say the lower order feedback loop in this part of the slide goes mainly to the system per se, and the high order impact, the evaluation of the high impact, goes to the general impact that your AI system may have in aspects like environment, like fundamental human rights, safety of the participants, which are core pillars of the and points of interest according to the AI Act. So when we talk about AI risks, we need to, I think you are quite familiar with this classification. We have three basic layers. We have the unacceptable, the high risk, and the low risk. So I go straight to the high risk, and I have highlighted some categories, some subclasses from the high risk classification according to the AI Act that are close to the sector of education and vocational training. I won't read you what the risks are about. You get the idea. When you have AI systems that, let's say, intend to be used to evaluate learning outcomes by assessing students' behavior, apart from the learning output of the individuals, are issues that we need to take into account. Or whenever we feed our system with extra data, then we basically navigate and tend to design and develop high-risk AI system, which by default impose to augmentor platform to come up with a series of practical steps in order to maintain compliance. There are other elements of high risk. The only reason that I have put it on the slide is because we might have elements from other types of AI systems which are not directly included in the element of in the classification of education and vocational training, but they might come from different types of sectors that might also be integrated into the AI system, which makes our system by default high risk. It's not necessary that an AI system that will be designed and developed and deployed within the context of an educational platform like augmentor, that it will be of high risk. However, this is our first approach, because by default, AI systems that are being designed and developed within the context of education for educational purposes then usually land the high risk class. Of course, there are some risk classification systems which are systems that perform narrow procedural tasks with no safety or security implications, things that are meant to review or improve the quality of human output, or systems that are used to detect decision-making patterns. This could be of interest for augMENTOR. Also, point 2, I guess it would be of interest for augMENTOR. And this is how we will manage to identify the level of risk of our AI system. This is a fundamental first step in order to identify our secondary, our downstream obligations. So first things first, we classify our system according to the risk classification as introduced by the AI Act. And as I said, this is not written in stone. And what I mean by that is that we might get into a situation where we have the risk level, the classification of our AI system can be dynamic in the sense that at the beginning it might be of a low risk, and then it might turn to be of high risk. So let's suppose that we have a system that is designed to assist, let's say, teachers in the course of management, content delivery, and basic assessment functionalities. So the main idea here for an AI system would be something like tracking assignments or access resources for the professors. So the data that we would normally use would be something like attendance data or assignment data, which more or less would frame and classify our AI system as a low-risk system, but because of their supportive and predictable, more or less, role. But as we said, AI systems are adaptive and are autonomous to some extent. So let's suppose that we add extra feature on our initial AI system, something like suggestions, or we introduce elements like automatic intervention in the way teachers deliver their lectures, or in the way they manage students, because by also and in this scenario, this would feed the extra feature with data like performance data, possible disabilities of the participants, socioeconomic backgrounds. So as long as we provide extra features in order, and we turn our system approaches more sensitive, let's say, aspects of our participants, then our system might switch its initial purpose and output, and so from solely tracking assignments and accessing resources, it might end up providing recommendations or automatically generating remedial programs for weaker participants. This, as you understand, has a very high impact to the participants. So by default, although even if at the beginning our system landed the augMENTOR space as a low risk system, it ended up as a high risk one. And this is very important because this has repercussions regarding the way we design and structure our human oversight mechanism. So if we have a low-risk system, it might be of something like common sense to have lesser human oversight mechanism. But as our system evolves and as we keep adding data and features that produce a higher impact on the individuals and the third parties that are somehow affected by our AI systems, then we need to have ways of classifying, of switching the classification of our AI system real time. So more or less, when we talk about I will focus on machine learning applications rather general purpose AI, because as I understand, the applications that are being generated at this point at augMENTOR could be at first instance typical machine learning developments, and I'm pretty sure that as through the course of time, this will be enriched by generative AI elements and more sophisticated neural networks and other systems. So in this typical machine learning development, we need to have a very sophisticated and efficient training data classification system with simply identifying which data are relevant and which are not. And this also has some ethical implications, as from the moment we manage to classify our data as relevant or not, we need to go on the deeper layer and start identifying whether these data reflect some kind of bias, and whether we can actually trace the final input in relation to the final output in relation to the input of the system. What do I mean by that is to actually be in a position to identify the concrete steps that the system follow in order to come up with a decision that impacted an individual. And at the second stage, impacted, let's say, environment or more wider societal issues. Some obligations for deployers, importers, and distributors, and more or less, this is something that goes also for designers and developers and deployers. When I'm going to share my slides, I will add some recommendations also for the developers and deployers. So, in a nutshell, when we talk about the EU AI regulatory package, of course, we have the AI Act, but we need to take into account that the AI Act is accompanied by the so-called, the upcoming AI Liability Directive and the revised Product Liability Directive. And the reason that the EU legislator does that is because the legislator identifies more or less AI systems as products. So the legal there is no something written out of thin air. Rather, the overall legislative blueprint that the EU legislator follows is subject to existing legislative mechanisms from past regulations that are linked to the product liability directives. And this, if I can put it in a more illustrative way for you to remember, is that the AI Act is about preventing harm. So our augMENTOR platform needs to make sure how the actual steps subject to the identified risk classification of the risk levels of our AI systems, and how these systems do not cause harm. And the liability directives are about providing compensation based on default-based liability or strict liability. And this is very important from a legal perspective, but I guess this is not of great interest to you at this stage. However, what I would like you to keep in mind is that when we talk about AI system design, development, and provision, then we do not only talk about meaningfully preventing harm, rather we need to take into account that we might be obliged to provide compensation based on a fault basis liability or on a strict liability, on an objective liability. And what we do about that? In order to be practical, there is an emerging literature and many initiatives regarding standards and trust marks, and more or less this is about how we will make the AI Act actionable. So I would strongly advise augMENTOR to navigate research, make a research on the different emerging standards and also on the harmonized, the EU, the upcoming harmonized standards about the AI Act, which more or less integrate the work that I provide you in the slide, in the middle layer of the slide. So more or less, what comes at play is a joint venture of organizations like IEEE in collaboration with Senelec, but also the familiar ISO certification. And actually, we do have in the market right now the ISO 42001, which is about artificial intelligence management systems. I would advise you to have a look on that. I would advise you to follow, to keep track on the work that is due in regard to the harmonized standards in EU regulation, and also the work regarding the work between IEEE certified, which is a certification program explicitly designed for assessing ethical issues. So the focus lies, of course, to basic legal compliance requirements. However, this scheme, the certification scheme, allows the risk owners, if I may say, to actually assess the ethical implication of the AI system. So for a high-risk system like educational AI systems that augMENTOR develops, I think this would be a nice match. Just to have a look on some some extra pragmatical scenarios and following the questions that I received. Let's have a look on. I received a question regarding personal education and what can we do in order to be aligned with legal and ethical requirements. So when we talk about personalized education, which is at the core of your overall structure and offer, then we need to take into account, we need to identify if the historical data that we introduce with which we feed our systems reflect some kind of bias. And then we need to identify, let's say, for example, correlations between low socioeconomic status and academic performance. If we have this kind of correlations, then we need to follow the steps that I will provide you right away. We need to keep a constant data audit, constantly reviewing historic data in order to identify any systemic bias that might affect certain people. We need to keep evaluating predictions, which this is something that we can do with many practical ways. One easy to understand one is by comparing the evaluations with the predictions and the prediction evaluation outcome with actual student outcomes. So an algorithmic performance with an actual one is a nice, let's say, benchmark, if I may say. We need to adjust the algorithms accordingly. And how we're going to do that? We need to reduce reliance on biased factor, and we need to include relevant academic factor, for example. So when we keep feeding our systems, we need to make sure that the data points that we provide are less biased and more relevant. Of course, we need to make sure that we do not label a vulnerable group as high risk. Rather, we ensure that they are not stigmatized, because we understand that if we have real-time personalized training offerings in a way that the user is somehow impacted, because if my training syllabus is being altered real time due to my let's say socioeconomic background, that, as you can imagine, would cause a lot of impact. Will have a great impact in my overall, let's say, stance. And of course, continuous review, monitoring and updating based on new data and the feedback. So what we need to keep into account when we talk about the data trade-offs is, of course, we have the data that others keep about you, and when I mean you, about the user of the augMENTOR platform. But then we need to take into account, we need to bring in the forefront that the actual value that the augMENTOR user obtains from the augMENTOR platform. So this is something, a trade-off that we need to take into account. How can we do that within the augMENTOR platform? An ideal, let's say, data flow for personalized learning kind of applications is something that actually the regulatory package actually imposes to platforms like augMENTOR. So when we talk about data flows, I don't know if augMENTOR also, I don't know, augMENTOR will be obliged to provide data to third parties, augMENTOR data, user data. So a nice mechanism in order to do that and maintain B2B data flows in a compliant and legally compliant way is by allowing the user to constantly provide her consent according to the specific preferences of the users and the actual purpose of the downstream use of the data. So if augMENTOR actually delivers data, let's say in this example, augMENTOR platform is business A, and actually is obliged or wants to share data with other parties, then a nice way, a legally and an ethical, human-centric, flexible way of doing it, this is by introducing automations in the way consents are provided. Or you can obtain the consents in advance in a dynamic way or in the very contract that you have with your augMENTOR users. But keep always the user in the loop when we talk about data flows. Another question that I received was about overall ethical and societal alignment. What measures do we need? So first and foremost, what we are actually doing as we speak, training. There is this article in AI Act, Article 4, which is about AI literacy, which in practice imposes to platforms like augMENTOR to train its personnel, its risk owners accordingly. So AI literacy is very highly ranked in the hierarchy of the obligation in order to maintain ethical and societal alignment. Fine-grained technical requirement mapping. This goes hand in hand with the extensible benchmarking suites. More or less suites. What does this more or less mean? It means that we need to map the technical requirements of our applications, of our AI systems, and translate them in legal terms and the other way around. Identify the legal requirements that actually apply in our AI system and try to come up with extensible benchmarking suites in order to come up with quantitative self-assessment from all applicable areas of the AI Act. Lately, there was this paper about an approach like this, which is called compl.ai, and it is about technically assessing the application of legal requirements of the AI Act in the most common large language models like ChatGPT, Llama, Mistral, and so on and so forth. Having identified the technical requirements and the benchmarking suites, then we need to come up with the standardized assessments on an AI system basis. So augMENTOR needs to map and identify the different AI systems that come at play within the context of augMENTOR and assess them subject to specific standard on an AI system basis. There is not one size fits all scheme here. Rather, we need to be very much focused and adjusted on a AI system basis. And of course, continuous review in order to create real-time information feedback loops. So if in a nutshell, if we talk about AI compliance and augMENTOR in an AI compliant environment, then we need to make sure that we operate in a lawful, ethical, and trustworthy AI ecosystem, which more or less follows the requirements that I communicated with you in the present webinar. And the things that we need to take into account is the AI Act and the liability directives, because I emphasize, I want to put your attention, put in your radar this twofold arrangements of the regulatory package, which is preventing harm and managing liabilities. Intellectual property rights, and this more or less goes on the copyright permissions that you have for the input data, and also the copyright permissions that you have for the overall AI model that you use and the AI systems that you develop and or integrate in your augMENTOR platform. GDPR issues and personal data. There are ways on how we will be GDPR compliant in an AI system framework. This is very complex. We need to have a specific webinar on that, but there are ways of doing that. And the upcoming standardized standards that I shared with you allow you to do that, especially the IEEE certified is a system that provides you very nice ways of identifying compliance in the context of an AI system. Overall ethical issues, of course, standards and trust marks. Keep innovating and keep following the market requirements in order to make sure that the user is part of the overall ecosystem. Thank you for your notice. I hope it was not that complex, and I'm happy to receive questions.
Thank you very much. Before we start the questions, I would like to introduce, to welcome some members of the panel who will facilitate the dialogue. Let us start with Dr. Stefanos Gerouvis, who is a member of the External Ethics Advisory Board of the augMENTOR project, with a background in the pedagogical and ethics of school-based research. I don't know, Stefanos, if you want to make a comment or share your insights, maybe?
Thank you very much, Alexandra, and thank you very much, Georgia. Maybe we can introduce all members and then we can start all the panel members. Is there somebody else is here as well? So then we can start. I have a few questions, but maybe it will be interesting to generate a bit of a dialogue with the other members.
Well, I also have invited Ms. Eleftheria Tsourlidaki, who is the quality manager of the augMENTOR project, and Professor Dr. Nikos Karakapilidis, who is the scientific coordinator. But I think he had some professional duties today, and I don't know if he managed to come here to be with us. So I think we should start with Stefanos.
Okay. Alexandra, thank you again for this very concise introduction to the topic. It's not only an introduction, it's a quite deep analysis also. I have one augMENTOR related question, and I have a more general question. So the let's say in relation to the use of AI in education, you mentioned a kind of a leverage, let's say, activity, which is compare AI-powered data against real data as a sort of, let's say, safeguarding mechanism of checking any biases on the system or any flaws there. Is this? I have in mind a sort of marking. You know, you can have AI-powered marking, and you can test that against the real human marking. Is that what it is about, or can you give us a number of other examples in which we can just, because this is it's quite a pressing matter in relation to the introduction of AI models in education. Thank you.
Well, this is a very complex question that has a very complex answer. So I'll try to keep it really, really high level. When we talk about evaluation we talk about constantly comparing the synthetic output, the synthetic outcome. Let's say we have a prediction about an augMENTOR user, an augMENTOR participant, and we say that this participant is classified as high risk, directly, explicitly, because this person is from a weak societal background, and at the same time he didn't perform well. Okay, but if we have also a mechanism where we compare, let's say, the real-time behavior or her behavior in a context, in educational contexts that are of less pressure, let's say, or something that doesn't pose pressure to this participant, then we might understand that the classification of this participant as high risk, and so the automatic adjustments of our predictions regarding these people would somehow alter. And what do I mean by that? We need to have constantly our eyes open in order to identify whether the data instances that we have, let's say gender, let's say color, let's say grades in primary school, I don't know, whether they are relevant in this particular context that we have. So this is why it is very important to come up with some very specific benchmarks that we constantly put in place in order to make sure that the real-time data that we receive are of relevance, or we need to update the benchmarks that we have come up with.
Thank you, Alexander. That's yeah, that was quite clear. I'm always, as a kind of more coming from the, let's say, the pedagogical expertise, I'm always worried about the ability of the teacher to sort of keep an eye on all these things and the developments. So whenever you ask him to come back with, let's say, a leverage activity, which is something like as you described, or as I try to describe, then we need to know how much he's able to spot things like this. I mean, to understand, obviously, you know, you can easily understand that the sort of the ethnic background might not be relevant to in your assessment, or should not be relevant in your assessment. However, you need to be also in a position to see if the system understands this. Thank you for this. I have somebody else wants to ask another question. I don't like, and then I can come back with a more general one. Dimitris has a question.
Well, I
Hello?
think, yes, hello, Dimitri. Can you wait, please, to finish with the panel, and then I'll come back to all.
Of course.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, sorry, I didn't get that. So it's the panel has a priority. Okay.
Yes.
Happy to.
I don't know if Eleftheria, Mr. Didaki, maybe she has a comment or an insight to share with us.
I'm happy to see the questions again.
Okay.
Later, when it's fine by me.
If I may provide some insight regarding the last comment, I totally understand. We are not obliged educators to become tech savvy. So let's talk in augMENTOR, in augMENTOR terms. I understand that augMENTOR is a platform that provides tools and services for educators. So when we talk about integration of AI systems, then we need to have the well-known front desk and back office, let's say, elements in our service. And what do I mean by that? The educator is the last resort before the output of the AI system will impact the user of augMENTOR platform. This means that the educator needs to have some very high level understanding of the AI system in place. At the same time, we need to maintain a very sufficient, let's say, back office infrastructure where aspects and dimensions like human oversight, like transparency, like privacy are being served in a nice way. Of course, this is not something that the educator will do. However, the educator may provide her own feedback. This feedback may be logged somewhere, and this log can be fed to the AI system again in order to update the way the system understands the object of the analysis, if that makes any sense. And again, this requires AI literacy to some extent for all stakeholders.
Absolutely. I mean, that is the point. Even if we do not force teachers to, let's say, to become AI experts in the classroom, there are two things. I mean, first of all, there is the tendency to use certain AI tools that actually save time and help you with marking and help you with planning and so on, and help you with, let's say, finalizing, what do you call it?
Typical
yearly,
narrow tasks.
Yearly sort of evaluations of teachers. At the same time, without understanding what are the consequences of this of such uses. So there is somehow to be a balance. I mean, in terms of schools, I mean, every school should have at least one person that should be able to support the other teachers with things like this. That's a solution. That's a solution. I mean, you can have one that has this enhanced role in which he can, and then of course, you can also have various levels. I mean, you can have at the regional directorate level, or you can have at the school management level, but it requires certain interventions in order to avoid scenarios in which you just described. Thank you.
If you think about it, there are so many different AI systems in the educational sector that I think educators that opt not integrating them by default, nothing, they will simply be left behind. So we need to come up with ways of generating co-generating intelligence with the AI system. I mean, we have behavioral analytics tools, we have virtual learning environments, we have predictive analytics platforms, we have AI-powered assessment tools for education, we have loads of different tools, Duolingo, language learning apps. We have so many things in the educational sector that by default you need to invest some time in specific tools in order to make a basic understanding of how the tool works, and then of the impact that the tool delivers, the impact that it provides. And as the higher the training, the higher the level of the literacy of the educators, the better the outcome. Because, as I said, there's this nice book called Co-Intelligence by Ethan Collin. He's a very cool professor from, I don't remember the university. He explains in a very nice
We've lost Alexandros somehow.
Okay.
Oh, there he's back.
You're back, Alexandros. I think some technical issues with internet, with the connection.
We lost your final point.
Yes, your final sentence.
Did you mention the book?
Yes, the book and the author.
Yes, which more or less explains in a very practical way how each one of us can integrate AI in a meaningful and practical way. So you don't have to be an expert to do that. You don't have to be a tech savvy. As long as you are susceptible in the things that are in the technological pipeline, then I think, and you have the good sufficient enough back office, then I think we're good.
Okay, Dimitris, the floor is yours. You may ask your question.
Yeah, thank you, Alexandre. It was really a pleasure listening to you. As you know, I have some a more pragmatic question. Actually, I'm representing Novelcore, who is the technical coordinator of augMENTOR solution of the project. I'm the project manager of Novelcore. Now we are approaching the last year of the project. End of 2025, we're going to deliver the final results to the Commission. There is a specific work package dedicated to the ethics. We have been through different procedures and specific paperwork, and with our ethics manager who is coordinating all the procedures, and with the advisory services of our external ethics board, to have followed all the regulations and all the processes needed by the Commission. We had a very successful interim review concerning the ethical dimension. What I would like to ask you is, given that the AI Act is something very lately announced within Europe, do you have any implications, any idea how is going the Commission to implement any procedures regarding ongoing Horizon Europe projects, given that you are also collaborating with Democritos, so you have, I believe, the expertise on managing the ethical dimension of this kind of research projects, and if any additional mechanisms or compliance tools would be adopted within the management of Horizon Europe ongoing projects, so that this would affect our current work for dealing and offering the augMENTOR solution to the Commission and to our stakeholders.
I think the focus at the moment lies on the actual market. Of course, research initiatives are also in the radar. However, the EU AI office, which is directly appointed to the Commission, is in the process of coming up with an AI governance scheme that applies horizontally at the moment. So I wouldn't say that there is a specific initiative regarding research projects. However, you gave me the nice pass to present you one nice Horizon project that we coordinate at Democritos, which is called Changer, and which is about providing meaningful developing tools that will allow research ethics committees to come up with meaningful, let's say, assessment tools and meaningful decisions regarding research projects. But there is not something central that comes directly, let's say, from the Horizon Europe in order for us to follow. And if you think about it, the ethics work packages the last 2 years, which somehow interact with the that time upcoming AI Act, are quite abstract, and they talk about simply coming up with an ethics manual. So there are not concrete steps. So each research project in consortium more or less did what it understood as ethically compliant and meaningful. But as things evolve, I think that compliance and an ethical AI architecture will be subject to specific either certificates or end-to-end frameworks and trust marks. So the reason I'm saying this is now I will put my legal hat and I will somehow claim that typical legal services are not enough in order to maintain compliance for AI systems. You need an end-to-end meaningful way of demonstrating compliance. And this is why I communicated the necessity for coming up with technical interpretations of AI Act. What do I mean by that? There is the ethical aspect about, let's say, the legal requirement for privacy and governance. How do you measure that? You need to put this ethical and legal aspect in metrics in the context of your project. And this is something that we don't have yet. However, I'm pretty optimistic that after the work that we will conduct in the context of the standard working group, which backs the AI board, we will be able to come up with very concrete steps on that.
Okay, is there another question from our participants? Yes, Eleftheria?
Just a clarification, really. I was interested in this Data Act element you mentioned. Is this part of the AI Act or is it something that is complementary to it?
No. Back in 2020, I will start with some history now. Back in 2020, EU Commission came up with a strategy for data. So the plan was like this: we need to come up with governance schemes, like the one that I illustrated with the slide with the B2B data flows, which means that we need to make sure and leverage data portability subject to GDPR requirements. So more or less, we need to navigate in a polarity. What is the polarity? The polarity is personal data protection and portability, because we cannot have AI infrastructures without data portability. So we need to come up with a way to do that. So according to this plan, we came up with this Data Governance Act, which is about more or less basically processing public sector data, because at the moment, what the status is that public organizations in theory are obliged to share their data, but in practice they have not the technical infrastructure or the know-how to do so. And at the same time, we have the Data Act, which is about creating data markets from the private sector, and especially from IoT services, smart fridges, smart cars, smart everything, and edge hardware systems, AI systems that are distributed out there and provide and generate data output. Let's say sensors in a field, or sensors that you put in the classroom, I don't know, in order to measure the reactions of the students, this kind of stuff. So this is considered proprietary data, which by default needs, under very specific requirements, needs to be shared further. And augMENTOR platform, sorry, allow me to complement on that. And augMENTOR platform is a service provider, right? And as a service provider, it needs to make sure not only to silo the data and keep them in the closed walls of augMENTOR, rather it needs to understand, to figure out ways on how it will make the data available for downstream users.
When you say other users, I assume don't mean end users like educators, though.
I lost it. Can you please repeat?
Yeah. When you say make them available to the data to other users, are you referring to end users like educators? I guess not. You're talking about.
It could be everything. It could be B2B data flows. It could be B2C, from business to customer, which means the user of the augMENTOR platform. It could be B2G, from augMENTOR to the government. And the Ministry of Education might knock the door of augMENTOR and ask the data in order to train its own algorithms for the public education system. You never know.
Thank you.
So if there is no other question, well, this is all from our side. Once more, I would like to say a big thank you to our speaker for his time and his dedication to our project. Thank you, Alexandros, for your insightful lecture. It was really inspiring.
Thank
I also appreciate the contribution of the panelists in facilitating the dialogue. Finally, I would like to thank you all for your attendance and active participation. I'm Georgia Livieri, the Ethics Manager of augMENTOR project, and this is the end of our ethics seminar. Have a nice afternoon all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, Enrique? Yeah, you have a question?
You have a question?
Oh, yes.
No, sorry, I was trying to close the session.
Okay.
Eleftheria, you may
Thanks.
stop the recording now.
I will stop the recording, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Alexandre. Thank you.